We're back.
We're back.
So this Monday, we're going to talk about Law 31 from the 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. And Law 31 says, control the options. Get others to play with the cards you deal. The best deceptions are the ones that seem to give the other person a choice. Your victims feel they are in control, but are actually your puppets. Give people options that come out in your favor, whichever one they choose. Force them to make choices between the lesser of two evils, both of which serve your purpose. Put them on the horns of a dilemma. They are gored wherever they turn. So that's Law 31. Control the options. Get others to play the cards you deal, which is a poker reference. So, you're dealing out the cards. The dealer is putting out the cards, but they're setting up already the options, pretty much. They already know what options they're giving you. Very, very manipulative, because you're making people think that they have a choice, right?
Yeah, that they have some degree of some control over what's happening, when in reality they have none. It's either this way or that way, but both ways are structured for the benefit that you have set forth. It's very interesting.
We've talked about it before, like in sales, you don't want to give too many options. Based on the information that you've gathered, you want to usually give 2 to 3 options. And Robert Greene talks about Henry Kissinger, how he was right hand to Nixon, and he would give Nixon 3 or 4 options. But he would coat one in a way that he would try to
push that one
in particular, and he was able to control a lot of things. I didn't know too much of the history of Henry Kissinger, but apparently he was extremely powerful via Nixon.
Continues to be.
Really?
Even at this type, yeah, he's a consultant, and he's way up there in the 90s, I think. When you get older like this, you start waning on your power, kind of thing, because you got a lot of young bucks that come up and sharp as all get go, and but from what I understand,
He's still around?
He's still around, and he maintained his strength for quite many years thereafter. In fact, recently I saw that someone confronted him because, all these people of power have done things that potentially hurt some people, that they've been involved with decisions that affect countries.
Sure. Economics. War.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's a big responsibility on their shoulders. So somebody recently confronted him and said some pretty strong things
against Nixon.
Against
Kissinger.
Yeah, against Kissinger.
Yeah.
And he's up there in the 90s, I think. And so, look at all the stuff that's going on in the world right now.
Yeah.
So, I've seen this happen in the corporate world.
Okay.
Especially when, for example, the thing that comes to mind, I'm a salesman, and most of my life, in fact, 96% of my life, I've been on commission. Okay? I've never had a salary. Actually, I did have a salary for some time when I was in the medical field, kind of thing. But ever since I went into business, from the moment I jumped in, and I've been 40 years in the business world, I was always on commission.
So you
always
lived off of the sales that you made.
Correct.
There was no...
Never had a salary.
Salary, hourly, nothing like that.
Nothing like that. And so I remember working for a major corporation, and the commissions were high, let's say, or higher on certain products. And being salespeople, those were the products that were exposed to the public, and they were pretty good products. But then the company thought, hey, this is way too much in terms of commissions for the agents, so we need to restructure these products or come up with new products. And so they came up with products where they gave us the option, you can choose this product or choose this product, but the commission has been cut in half. And that's why it comes to mind, because they were giving us the option of choosing, but either way we went, the commissions had been cut in half. So, you were doing potentially the same amount of work for half the pay. And then you see, when something like this happens, how little control you have over certain things when you're in the corporate world.
Right. Once they say, and they like to use words like sunset, we're going to sunset this product. That means we're going to get rid of it. So it's going away in January. And then the new product happens to have a lower commission, or it doesn't have all the bells and whistles that the old product had and isn't as good of a product.
Correct. For the public.
For the public. For the public. Yeah.
And I struggled with that a lot.
Yeah.
When I saw that a good product, or that a particular product was being pulled, and a similar product was, envisioned and come out, but it wasn't as good as the previous one for the public. And you see that, unfortunately, you see that all over the place.
Yeah.
It's not just one company, it's
No.
many companies. They have to cut back and to stay alive, make profits,
But you see it clearly in a corporate setting that you really don't have choices. If you said, no, I want to continue to sell this,
you can't.
You can't. Yeah. So you really don't have choices, but they put it out in a light like you've got an array of choices. And that's the thing. The words freedom, options, and choices. Those three words, we like the sound of that. We love the sound of freedom, options, and choices. But at the end of the day, they are the ones that have been set for us when we work for a company. But so that's the very, let's say,
and it's happening today. It just happens with one of the carriers, one of the large carriers that we represent.
Yeah, you don't have that many.
This is the way it is.
This is the way it is.
As you know, we've done the insurance industry in California, in the whole United
States, yeah.
It's in pretty chaotic state.
Your options are now becoming limited.
We have much limited options, and who gets hurt? The public.
The public, for sure.
The public. And we are part of the public. We
absolutely.
Get hurt too.
Absolutely.
Because some people see us, this is an insurance agent, this is a real estate agent, but this affects all of us.
Yeah.
Okay? We are the carriers of in other words, we provide the product to the public. We're the middleman. Okay?
Everybody's affected.
We're also consumers. We're
Absolutely.
in the pool right with you guys.
And, I was talking to my wife about it because we were talking about how interest rates affect everything.
Oh.
So, interest rates, when they hit 8%, now they're still in the 7% interest rates.
7.5.
We're end of November,
Yeah.
2023. That affects your car loan, your credit card, your house, your commercial loan. It affects the lease. It affects personal loan, a line of credit. Everything is tied into, because a lot of us are borrowing money, whether it's in a business setting or whether it's for our personal. We're borrowing money, so that interest rate is affecting. Now you could say the person that has cash, it doesn't really affect them.
You can, but how much cash do you have? And how many people have all that cash?
Right.
So people in
people.
situations like you and I, we need to borrow in order to continue to grow.
Right.
And when you borrow, you bring on debt, Sure, you can write off the debt, but you still need to borrow.
Right.
Okay, and when you're borrowing at current rates.
Correct. And so, going back to
The law,
the law,
because we got such.
who's controlling the options with regards to interest rates or the economy?
Okay, well, I believe that there are people that are not in our sights.
Right.
People that are running this show are
And-
not the Republicans or the Democrats. There are people behind the curtains
Well,
that
that's-
have a tremendous amount of power,
And that's one thing I was thinking, like
like BlackRock and all these.
even in the presidential setting, you really only got a couple options, and so we are in the land of opportunity. I was fortunate to be born here. You were born in another country, but but it's not like you have all these options. There's a couple. You have maybe two choices. Now this race is interesting. There's independent that apparently is growing a lot of traction, but at the end of the day, it usually comes down to two choices. And how are those choices? Who's controlling who those two choices are?
It's interesting. You bring to mind, we just recently had a meeting with a young man. I think he's a year younger than you. And a successful businessman.
Mm-hmm.
And so is his family. And he was mentioning, it was a very interesting meeting. But in the many things that were said, he was saying, I don't remember quite how he put it, but I think he said it's not quite the land of opportunity anymore. That's how I interpreted it. What he was saying is it's harder today. And I said to him, I think it's still the land of opportunity, but definitely I agree with you that it's much, much harder, to get ahead nowadays because we have so much regulation, not only by all these governmental, agencies and so forth.
Yeah, your choices are limited.
Yeah, you have to do so many things, in order to make a buck.
Yeah.
Like I was reading an article. If you're a businessman in, I think it was Ireland, and you make $1 million, by the time they take out all kinds of stuff, not only taxes, but they take out for health insurance, for this, for that. By the time you're done making $1 million in Ireland, you end up with $439,000 net, something like this. And you look at where did the other 560,000 go, and they went to, some government agencies, unemployment taxes, this taxes, that taxes.
Yep.
So, the net, what you get to keep nowadays is it's harder. And then who ends up playing? You have options, right? Well, what are your options? The public pays more.
Right. But, I still believe that we have the ability to, even within, let's say, the limited options, we still have the ability to make our way and create our own economy, our own future. However,
I agree.
There's no doubt we are affected by the rules that are imposed on the game because it's a game, and like some people look into things like 1031 exchanges with real estate. They look into write-offs for their income. They look into capital losses, capital gains. They look into all these different ways that are rules that were created that you can use in your favor.
Rapid depreciation of your buildings.
So accelerated depreciation.
Accelerated depreciation. What is
with
that called?
real estate.
There's a term. There's a
Cost segregation
cost
studies.
segregation.
So there's a lot you can do, but let's go back to the law.
Yes.
But there is the rules of the game. There are limited rules. It's not like free for all. You can't just do whatever you want. Now, one thing I thought was interesting was when you are in a position of power. But you don't want this law is for the person who is in a position of power, but they don't want the person that they're imposing their will on to realize that they are imposing their will on them.
Correct.
They want, so if I'm in a position of power, I want you to do something, but I don't want you to think, he made me do that. I'm going to want you to think, you know what, Mike gave me several options, but the options I've laid out, so you get a choice and you feel empowered by that choice, but those options I laid out are in my favor.
Correct.
One thing that I thought was interesting was also this applies to people who are very, what's the word when you, indecisive. So this law can be used with people who are very, they can't make a decision. So you force your will, basically. So one of the quotes was from Robert Greene, you force the resistor. Push them to choose what you want them to do by appearing to advocate the opposite. So this is a technique, you can call it, because there are different techniques of using Law 31. Another technique is called shrinking the options, the technique of shrinking options with the art dealer Volar. But this technique is called force the resistor. So what I do is I'm going to push you to choose. So I'm going to push them to choose what you want them to do by appearing to advocate the opposite. So I'm going to pretend like I'm going to want you to choose A so that you choose B. And I remember
Very
Robert
interesting.
Greene,
Wow.
was it Robert Greene or I think it was Robert Greene that talked about this play out. He said that there was this kid that was very, very not doing well in school, very rebellious, didn't want to learn. And it was because he was challenging authority and he didn't want the teacher had done something to him where, I don't know if, demeaned him or something. Mm-hmm. And so he was challenging the teacher, but he was getting very, very negative grades. So then he was actually kicked out of the school and had to do all of his homework and everything at home. And so he meets with, I believe, a psychologist, and the psychologist tells him, look, they want you to fail. They want you to do so poorly in this class, and you're going to prove them right if you fail. Show them that they're wrong. And he got them, I think, by using forcing the resistor. I think he got to the final goal, which was for him to do well in school, but he did it by making
reverse psychology.
By reverse psychology. It's not exactly this.
Yeah, the story, as I remember it, is he told them exactly like you said. They want you to fail.
Yeah.
They will be thrilled and fulfilled if you got a full failing grade in this class, an F. But you know what? What would happen if you deceived them? If you buckled down and you really studied,
right,
and you got an A, and you showed them how wrong they were, that would be like a slap in the face, big time, to all these guys that are betting that you are going to fail.
Yeah, yeah.
And he was able to reach that young man, and he turned around and he got straight A's and he succeeded in that class. And as he did that, he transformed himself into another person, and he went on to higher studies and did exceedingly well. That's the story.
It's very interesting,
because
no you're using the resistance or but you're getting the result that you want.
Right. And it takes a lot sometimes to reach a young man, like, for example, in classes nowadays, I'm on social media a lot, and I see how our teachers are being taxed or there's so much energy that classes are not what they used to be. We don't have the level of respect for the teachers that we had, and a lot of students are acting out in class, and things are really seems like sometimes out of control.
I resist this idea that the times before were this perfect time, or this time that was so much better. I kind of resist that idea because, Elvis Presley shaking his hips was the devil's music
Right.
at a
right.
certain point in time. So I don't necessarily. I mean, kids have always been kids. Kids have always. I remember in high school, there was teachers that would get run over by kids. When I was in high school, which is over, 2008. So that's when I graduated. So that's what, almost 18 years ago or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jesus.
2008, 18,
You graduated
2008. Yeah.
10. Yeah, that's 10. That's 2.
That's 15,
14,
15, and then I was started 4 years prior.
Right.
But there were teachers that would get run over by the kids. So I don't know about this idea that now the times are all this bad. I think that I would argue against that. And I think social media can show you certain things that you want to see, or show you things that they want you to see, or whatever the case, because that's what gets clicks on the algorithm.
Right.
Not happy necessarily, like, oh, school's going well.
I don't think that there's ever been any point in time where we can say, look, this was a perfect time. But I was exposed to different things, and we're getting away from the law, but there's a lot less respect for authority. And I see that because some people in authority have abused the power that they have.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you see, but we could talk about it for years, because I feel in my heart that there's less respect nowadays. Yeah. I can understand why you would not have this godlike figure like in the old days. You had your priests, your doctors, your teachers. These were people that were the staple of, they had, to a certain extent.
I don't think it's good to put anyone ever on a pedestal.
No. And I think that there was something about that in the older, but nowadays we have deteriorated so much that I think you need a certain level of respect in order to be able to learn from someone,
So you think people just don't respect anybody?
I think that the kids are out of control.
Right. And whose fault is that?
I think it's the parents' fault. I can't blame society
and
for
who
that.
raised those parents?
Huh?
And who raised those parents?
Prior parents.
The grandparents.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and then who raised those grandparents? So why is it happening? Whose fault is it? Because you can't just look at a kid and be like, there's no respect. They don't respect anybody.
Well, we have, our society is falling apart, man.
Yeah.
We don't have the integrity.
I disagree. I personally disagree with that point of view.
Okay, well, that's good. You're the eternal optimist.
No,
and we need people like you.
Well, I just think that
I'm a little more realistic.
if you say you're a lot on social media.
I am.
So that's your source of information.
Okay, so you're saying it's not accurate.
No, I think social media will skew our view of life.
Okay.
I want to talk to teachers. I want to talk to students. I want to talk to the real who are on the ground.
You know what you remind me of? Patrick with David. Because he wants to go to the source too. I have a lot of respect for that. I have a lot of respect for that. Yeah.
So Ivan the Terrible.
Ivan the Terrible.
Ivan the Terrible, who gets that name because he was an interesting man. Now he ended up killing his son.
Wow.
And there's actually a photo which I saw. It was at the Huntington Library in I believe it's San Marino, California. And it's I saw the painting. I'm sorry, not a photo. It's a painting of him holding his son that he had just killed.
Wow.
And it goes because he actually saw his daughter dressed a certain way, or his daughter-in-law. Let me look it up so I get it right. I think it was his daughter-in-law. And dressed a certain way, and he beat her up. And then the son came in, and he killed his son.
Wow.
So we'll put the picture up so
That's
people
crazy.
can see it.
How do you do that?
Yeah, this is the photo.
Wow.
Here, he's holding his... Yeah, I don't know if you can see it there, but...
Wow.
Anyways, this gentleman, Ivan the Terrible, it was an interesting history on why Robert Greene brings him up.
Well, he was losing control of Russia.
Correct. To the noble class.
Right.
And he needed to change that, and he used Law 31 to do that.
That's correct. He gave him two options because he quit. He walked away from power. And then the people saw the decadence and the mess, the chaos that would ensue. And so they came back and begged him to take control. But he became, what was he, a dictator, right? But the people had asked him to come back. So in that sense, they would not be able to say, hey, you can't do this or that. He would govern without limitations. And so they were given two options. And they picked, according to their minds, the lesser of two evil, which is the one he wanted them to have. They
Correct.
brought him back to power.
They begged him back.
Right.
Because they were scared of this noble class, which their name was the boyars.
The boyards, correct.
They were ruling nobility, and they were resisting a lot of the decisions that Ivan the Terrible was trying to make.
Right.
And so he needed to get rid of them, and that's what you're saying. When they brought him back, he did this. It was a scene. It was a spectacle where he took all his gold and everything from Moscow, put him in these sleds, and leaves the city.
He goes to a province.
Yeah. And then they knew where he was. He writes a letter to the people, and it's read in public. And in that letter, he's basically saying, look, I'm leaving because of this group of people, this noble class called the boyars. And then they end up coming to him, and like you said, they get him back, but he says with one condition.
I will govern without limitation.
Correct.
And that's what he wanted. And that was the option. So, it's interesting because Ivan the Terrible, got very, very sick, very ill at the age of 23.
Yeah, he was very young.
Yeah. And in that process, he went to... People thought that he wasn't going to make it. He was very sick. He was like on his deathbed, so to speak. Okay? But he ends up recovering from that. But while he was sick, he brought in his groups, and including the boyards, and said, hey, I need you to plead alliance to my son. I need you to support my son because I'm going to pass. And a lot of them said no, and many of them said, I'm not sure, but he wasn't getting from the boyards what he wanted. They were not going to support his son in case of his passing. And so he got a preview to that, and then lo and behold,
he survives.
He survives that big illness.
Yeah.
And that's why he turned on them, because he knew that they were out to destroy him. And he got like a quick flash, of that while he was sick and dying in bed, because he brought him in, and they said, oh, no, we're not going to support your son.
Now,
you don't get that chance, that kind of chance in history. You don't get to see sometimes who your enemy really are. Correct.
Now, I was listening to, in preparation, a little bit of the history of Ivan the Terrible.
Uh-huh.
And they go way back. The history of the boyars and this noble class and Ivan the Terrible go way back, where he was raised by some of these people. And it said that he was living in a palace, but they would force him to beg for food. And they mistreated him as a kid because his father died at a very young age. He became at 3 years old, apparently, he was like the czar.
Wow.
But his mother was the one who was making all the decisions.
Mm-hmm.
But so the boyars and him already have a history way before.
Clashing.
I wanted to get it right. On November 19th of 1581, Ivan became very angry with his son's pregnant wife because of the clothes she wore, and beat her up. As a result, she miscarried.
Oof.
His son argued with his father about the beating, and in sudden fit of rage, Ivan the Terrible raised his iron-tipped staff and struck his son a mortal blow to the head. You guys do your research. This is just what I'm reading off of Quora. But there's a very famous painting where Ivan the Terrible's holding his son, um, and his son was dying already,
Wow.
or had just died. But
Tough.
another technique which I thought was really cool about this law was the technique of shrinking options, which the art dealer Volar would, which was a very well-known art dealer. People would come to his gallery, right, and he would show them, let's say, 3 paintings, and then they'd say, "Oh, okay, let me think about it. We'll come back." Blah blah blah. They would come back. They would leave. They would come back another day, but he would purposely show them not as nice paintings.
Oh, okay.
And acting as if he thought he had shown them those. "Oh, you came back to see the paintings. Yes, let me bring them out. Not as nice. 3 options. Oh, we're going to think about it. Let us think about it." They go home. They come back another day. And he does it again. "Oh, yeah, the ones that you wanted to see. 3 options. Even even uglier options, let's say." And the idea was that it's called the technique of shrinking options. And so that the people would think, "Man, we better pick one of these 3 before we walk out of here today, because when we come back, he's going to bring us even worse options." Anyways, I thought that was an interesting, I guess it would be to a certain similar effect. There was a real estate investor that I was listening to on the Bigger Pockets podcast. And he says he makes an offer to a guy for a property. So let's say I offer you your building, and I say, "Oh, I'll give you $500,000. But this offer is good for the next day." And then the person would say, "Well, no, that's way too little. We can get more for it, this and that." He says, "Look, I know the situation of the building. This would get it done. This offer is good for 24 hours. And he says, "By the way, I'm not going to ever make you this option again. If you don't take it, it's no longer, you're not going to have it."
Yeah, he puts a time frame on
A
it.
time frame. They sometimes would go and he'd never hear from them again. But every once in a while, they would come back to him. "We'll take your option at $500,000. Well, it's no longer $500,000. Now it's $450,000.
Wow.
Just an example. He would drop the price. And that option is good for 24 hours. And if you don't take this one, then in some instances he would say it's going to be a lower price. And in other instances he would say, "You're never going to get another offer from me again." And that was his negotiating. So it's
That's tremendous.
a technique of shrinking options.
Wow.
I don't know. Some of this stuff is not my style.
I like the idea of putting a time frame on things as I get more and more exposed.
Okay.
Especially in the real estate, because there's a lot of stuff that happens out there. They can use your offer to try to prop up the price to another buyer.
Yep.
"Oh, no, I can't take this because I already have 400,000 on the table," and so there's a lot to be said about negotiating in that way. It could be a double-edged sword. You could be cutting your own throat on that one, depending on how bad you want the property and your clients, or your clients.
Yeah. That's a really good point, because that style of negotiation or tactic, you got to be really willing to completely walk away from it. So you must have other things in play.
It's not my style.
Yeah.
Okay. Looking back on some of the things that we have done, there might have been a benefit in putting a time frame in 1 or 2.
Mm-hmm.
But see, when you do that, I think you affect the process of negotiation.
Okay.
Because we can go back and forth. And I think that to have an open dialogue, it's extremely important in obtaining the property that you want. If you're dealing with someone that's genuine, right? You'll be able to, because we all, they say we're all actors in the stage of life, right? You'll be able to penetrate that, safety net or whatever they put on, you know?
You know, you brought up the timeline. We had one person once present an offer with a timeline over the weekend, let's say, and you said that doesn't jive with us. Like, that's not gonna work here. Well, okay, well that's our offer is good until that point. And you said, okay, well that's not gonna work with us. We've got
Right.
other options, and
We do.
And to their credit, they took a step back because they did really want that deal. And to their credit, they took a step back and they were willing to work with our timeline. But it was interesting because they weren't willing to turn away the deal.
Right. They tried,
They tried.
and they got some,
Resistance.
and then they said, "Oh, okay, let's see how we can do it." That's smart because you keep
It's
open
smart.
dialogue.
And I think also it has to do with your ability to, and our ability to negotiate and know how to handle these characters.
Right.
So it doesn't
Yes.
matter what you're doing. These laws, whether you choose to employ them yourself or try and protect yourself from people using these laws, you got to know the laws.
You gotta know the laws. Now there was a guy over the weekend that he said, "Hey, I just ordered a book," and I thought to myself, "You don't need it."
There's some people that
Some people don't need the book.
they know the laws innately. You could
Innately, yeah.
say they grew up in a
In an environment where they need to be careful about this, careful about that, and then they develop this.
You could say street smart, right?
Oh.
That's what street smart is. Somebody
Absolutely.
who they grew up in an environment that you learned you don't go
Oh.
down that way, you don't do this, you don't.
If you listen to 50 Cent, I've seen some of his
50
interviews.
Cent.
Oh, 50 Cent. I've seen some of his interview, and in one of them he says, I could tell. The guy, I could tell, just watching the man come in through the front door or coming into the room, I could tell immediately he got that good. Whether they were there to produce a fruitful environment or not, he could tell, like,
Yeah.
I don't know what it was, and he didn't go into it too deep, but it's either the way the guy walked, the way that was dressed, what he said right off the
Look
top.
in the eyes, something.
The eyes, you talk to, looking at people in the eye,
Yeah.
the handshake, the body movement. I mean, it's it was very interesting because I believe he was shot many times, and he was close
9
to
times?
yeah, close to death,
Yeah.
and he came back, and
Crazy.
things change. Your perspective on life, definitely, no doubt about it, no
Yeah.
doubt about it. So it's very interesting. But knowing these laws, some of them are extremely manipulative.
This
You don't
one
have
is.
to necessarily use them, but being aware of them allows you not to be used by them.
Correct. That's the big one.
That's a big one.
Um,
Because some of these things are underhanded as all get go. Like this one. This is
well,
you know.
and it may not be something in terms of like, Ivan the Terrible and what the destruction he did and all these. It could be a business opportunity, and somebody's competing against you, and you want that deal, you want that opportunity, and you got to know how to handle yourself. I did want to read a couple more quotes that I thought were
Sure.
powerful. This is a quote. If you are clearly the agent of their punishment, expect a counterattack, expect revenge. If, however, they seem to themselves to be the agents of their own misfortune, they will submit quietly. It's like, submitting. I'm thinking like in UFC, when someone gets submitted, you choke them out to death, and they go away quietly. Not to death, but you choke them out, and
You
they
put
go.
them to sleep.
Yeah, but they're not giving you a big fight because they themselves feel that they were the agents of their own misfortune, and that's what Ivan the Terrible did. Once he came in as a full-fledged dictator and did horrible things, took land from the people, did all these things, they could not say anything about it because they asked him to come back.
Right.
So, Anything else you want to throw in
No,
regarding this law?
no, it's very good. We covered it.
Our goal is by January 1st to hit 1,000 subscribers.
Okay.
We're over halfway there. And then hopefully if the listeners like it, they'll continue to like and subscribe because our channel keeps on growing.
Keeps on growing. Thank you guys.
Very cool. Thank
All
you.
right.